sports arena, right? So let's look at the scorecard. Who are the winners? Who are the losers? And in your opinion, knowing that opinions are varied on our panel, which I like.
Yeah.
So Steve, do you want to start us off in your opinion?
Okay, first I think consumers are the winners because I believe that we have a risk under the rule that all costs of building the internet must be paid by end users. I think there's a risk that we end up with haves and have-nots, and we already are to some extent, among end users. Those who can afford to buy a gigabit to their house or can afford to buy 40 megabits or 80 megabits to their house are getting tremendous amounts of speed, and as capacity constraints might be forced into place, greater ability to access capacity and obtain all the content they wish to obtain, while as those who aren't willing or lack the ability to pay, for 40 megabits or 80 megabits or a gigabit to their house are left with lower speeds and with maybe data limitations as plans like the wireless plans, become more prevalent. And so I think that as a two-sided market is of value to consumers because it spreads the cost, and those that are causing significant cost in the internet, the Netflixes of the world, have the opportunity to assure greater access to their customers and at the same time cover some of the costs of the billions of dollars that are invested in building the internet just in this country every single year. So I think consumers win. I also think regulators win because, as I said, the FCC did not appeal this decision. And the reason it didn't appeal this decision was because the court agreed that Section 706 of the Act gave them independent authority to impose certain regulations on the internet. It also recognized the right under Section 201. So the FCC has the ability to manage the internet and manage access to it, manage net neutrality in a way that fosters the greatest level of consumer benefit. So that's who I'd say are the winners.
All right, and Dr. David?
Well, so, I would say, at least on the surface, you'd also have to say that the large ISPs are winners because they're, particularly Verizon was the one that, brought the case, and in essence, the outcome is what they're looking for. Now, is it exactly did the court exactly decide what Verizon would want? Well, we don't know. So with that, then you're left with, with Steve, my definition, everybody's a winner. So I'm not sure we can go that far. To be honest, I don't think we know in terms of who wins and loses out of this. I agree, the FCC could win if they clean up their approach on net neutrality, if they use this as an example, because the courts smacked it back to say, get your house in order in terms of how you are regulating these services. If you're going to regulate it as a common carrier, call it as a common carrier. If it's through Section 706, how far can you go on your non-discrimination, and have the courts test it, and that could eventually be a win because they get it. They get a solution that's going to work. The consumer, I don't think the consumer is really going to be. I'd say it's neutral right now because most of the large ISPs have said, while this is happening, they're not going to change things very much. Now, that's with the qualifier. We've got this sponsored data, and if other ISPs, if CenturyLink comes out with their own kind of sponsored data, we don't know how this market's going to evolve. And the sponsored data approach is that with your smartphone, you basically can use some apps that, if it's a Netflix app as an example, and this is not, there's not a business agreement right now between Netflix and AT&T, but Netflix has purchased some data from AT&T so that when I use Netflix on my smartphone, it doesn't count against my usage cap. And is that good or bad? We really don't know what in the long term the trends will be. If all applications migrate to a sponsored data plan, well, that could be a potential downside, because if you're a small startup, how do you have enough money to pay all the ISPs that, or have sponsored data plans? It's a lot of transaction costs. That could be potentially something that harms innovation, or it might evolve in a way that it's very easy and simple, and people like that. People like the broadcast model. People like things that are free. They like ad-sponsored models. Does this evolve in that type of a way? And the two-sided market is not very doesn't impinge upon the consumers? We don't really know yet, but it's certainly going to be something that's followed quite closely.
Hunter?
I think it would be useful to frame this one step further from what I said originally and bifurcate consumers from everything else, which I'll just call network operators, okay? So this whole discussion that we're having right now is centered on consumers. Consumers are hostages, and the service providers are telling you in their benevolent way that this is the best internet for you, and we decide. Because consumers don't really have a choice. Because individuals cannot go out and build their own mobile phone and create a whole network in a spectrum that's licensed and build all this infrastructure just so that they can have a mobile device. They also can't build all the infrastructure from their home all the way back to a peering point to build their own internet because they can't. They can't afford to. Consumers are hostages, and they're told, this is the quality of the food that you're going to eat, and you're going to smile, and you're going to pay me for it. Now let's talk about the network operators. Independent network operators, okay, are the winners here. Anyone that has or can secure rights of way and build their own infrastructure, fiber, and light it, can bypass all of this entire discussion. It does not apply to them. And this is not new, okay? I come out of the international wholesale voice world. You ever heard of a white route and a gray route? A leaky PBX? People know what that is. I mean, the old circuit switch TDM voice days are kind of gone. But this all happened already. There used to be days when there was just PTTs and international settlement agreements. And then there was DREG and Carter phone and a lot of other things that happened in the hardware world. And people built routes to bypass the incumbents so that they could basically lower their costs, and bypass took place physically in buildings known as carrier hotels that were born out of the necessity to interconnect around the incumbent and their laws and rules and pricing. And that drove an entire industry of thousands of networks to be born because no one could afford to pay $1 a minute or $2 a minute or whatever. And the bottom dropped out of the whole circuit switch voice world very quickly. It was a race to the bottom. And thank God IP came along and saved the day and made everything flat rate. And then the whole voice world just became an app. And it disappeared. And nobody even tracks it anymore. But the essence of network operators being able to find those common points on planet Earth to put their own equipment and directly connect to other networks was the basis upon which no neutral rules necessarily applied because they could do something about it. Consumers can't. So let's just talk about net neutrality in those two very clear, distinct ways. When a network owns the last mile, whether it's mobile or fixed line, they're the ones that the content providers have to go negotiate with. So I don't care what the net neutrality rules are, and I don't care if the FCC has the authority to enforce them or not. If a Netflix has to go sit at the table and cut a deal directly with Comcast, that supersedes net neutrality rules. And it's a bilateral peering relationship with certain economic terms that are not disclosed publicly. And like Dr. David Reed here just said, now think about the internet. It's a multilateral relationship. Once you're on it, there's a set of rules. And now there's, well, who's paying for what and which side, and basically who can I corner and say, you have to come through me to go to here, so you must make a deal with me. So the multilateral nature of the best efforts internet, which people have come to rely on, all of a sudden becomes the old wholesale circuit switch, got to sit down and do 1,000 bilats with people. And who's got the time for that? Who's got the money for that? So if you're an app developer and you just want to throw your app out on iTunes to get out to the world, you better hope Apple has done all that bilateral relationship stuff already, or else the quality of the delivery of your product to the end user is going to be impacted. And that's something that people never had to think about before.
So can I jump in a little bit
sure.
here? Because I agree on your point, by the way, on
Hostages.
Well, on more, if you can get entry.
That's a strong word.
Well,
I'm just trying to get people to
No,
understand.
I agree on the point on entry on fiber to the home and Google Fiber, and that's kind of an interesting topic. But on the point, I guess, what I mentioned earlier, I don't think the Netflix Comcast agreement is a net neutrality issue. And you see that often, that it's the end of net neutrality, that Comcast and Netflix came to an agreement. And that I disagree with. For what Hunter is talking about, and the way you put it, it's not about the internet in that agreement. Netflix has, over time, developed their own content distribution network and capability. They relied on third-party providers to do that for a while, Akamai and Cogent. At some point in time, when you're developing your own, you make a lease versus we're going to do this our own agreement, and that's going to be a function of where your traffic's going and how you're going to interconnect and the like. With regard to the agreement with Comcast and where the outrage has been that I've read in some of the different articles and which I think is misplaced, is, they're shocked that now Netflix is going to pay Comcast for the peering. Well, I'm sure most of you who have done any peering know there are paid peering agreements before this occurred. And in particular, when the asymmetry got above 2 to 2.5, a lot of the peering policies of different ISPs are to say, we got to talk about this because this bill and keep isn't working anymore. And so with regard to Netflix, they are clearly asymmetric, and that ratio is going to be above 2.5 to 1. And so that negotiation with Comcast makes a lot of sense. Now, when you read the details of it, that, again, this is all under NDA for the folks, I haven't seen the agreement, I don't know if anybody here has, that have been leaked out. You hear that Netflix got a multi-year agreement, and the agreement was on the order of millions of dollars. Not hundreds of millions, and this is the traffic provider that is 30% of the traffic. So at least some of the stuff that's been leaked out is there is not, this wasn't a huge transfer of wealth for what and Netflix has created to Comcast because they have a market power in the access portion of the network. That being said, and I agree with Hunter, that is something that needs to be watched. To the extent to which there is not significant competition on the access part of the network, and there is a lot of leverage by one provider, that is something to watch, because through these peering agreements, they might be able to leverage and get additional rents because of that market power. But here, for example, in the Denver area, you've got Comcast. CenturyLink has got a DSL technology. They're saying they're going to be investing in higher speed technologies that'll up the speed on the broadband. Hopefully we get the competition or Google Fiber or somebody, and that mitigates that. But that's a point with regard to Comcast and Netflix on peering. It's not net neutrality in the sense that Comcast is somehow throttling Netflix traffic or there's a discrimination or blocking issue. And so that's why I make the case, this isn't a net neutrality issue, it's a peering question.